Now, these past few days, we've been looking at the first reading, the letter to the Corinthians. And yesterday I spoke about how the Greeks didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead, because resurrection means you come back with a body, and they didn't want a body. They wanted to be a soul floating on the clouds. And Paul said Jesus rose. If Jesus rose, we're all rising. And that's the same thing you hear again today. Basically, he says, if Jesus didn't rise, let's all go home. This is silly. So he's repeating that idea. What I really like to talk about is the gospel from Luke. First of all, it mentions some of the women who followed Jesus, and it mentions Mary Magdalene. Now, Mary Magdalene has an axe to grind, because a lot of us think that she was a prostitute and stuff like that. It does not say that in the Bible. It never says that. All it says is that she had 7 demons and they were driven out. The idea that she was the woman caught in adultery or the sinful woman who washed the feet of Jesus, that came much, much, much later, the 7th century, when they started saying that. Originally, what was Mary's job? Well, she is the one who went to the tomb, found it empty, and told the apostles. What's the definition of apostle? Somebody who witnesses to the resurrection. Who's the first apostle? Mary Magdalene. In fact, in all of the frescoes that you see in the ancient churches, it shows her not dressed like a prostitute, but running from the tomb to announce the good news. Now, the second thing to notice about this, they mention the names of women. That doesn't happen often in the Gospels. Think of the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew is Joseph this and Joseph that. Mary barely shows up. Whereas Luke, there's women all over the place. Remember when Mary meets Simeon? Who else is there? Anna. Remember the lost sheep? It's also the woman who loses a coin. Kingdom of God, a man plants a mustard seed. It's also like yeast and dough, woman's work. And in this passage, Luke has just mentioned the name of the 12 apostles, and he mentions the name of women. In fact, at the resurrection, in the different Gospels, you get a different number of women. In John's Gospel, 1 woman, Mary Magdalene, because she represents the church looking for her beloved. And I don't care what Dan Brown said, she didn't get married to Jesus, okay? That's just not true. In Matthew, you have 2 women, because you need 2 to give witness. In Mark, 3 women, because Mark is kind of like the home videos. He tells it the way it was. And in Luke, you get the whole lady sodality, a bunch of women, because Luke likes women. Message, women are credible witnesses. They're supposed to help evangelize the kingdom of God, and they play an important role. Remember Lydia, the seller of purple goods, when Paul meets her at Philippi? Seller of purple goods. Purple was very expensive in those days. She's running the local branch of Neiman Marcus. And the implication is the church met in her house. So the importance of women, and we're still debating that today. The big debate in Rome is whether women could be deacons again. Because in the early church they were. So could we have deaconesses? The only problem is it's in Rome. And Roman discussions always take a long time. You know how we say that when you're sick, not feeling well, you call the doctor? Take 2 aspirin and see me in the morning. In Rome, they say, take 2 aspirin and see me in 300 years. So the discussion will go on for a while, but hopefully they'll find what the Spirit is leading to. And the third thing that we can notice from this, all throughout Luke's gospel, Jesus reaches out to those who are excluded, who are at the margins. In Luke's day, in Jesus' day, that includes women, but it also includes foreigners. Remember, this is the gospel of the Good Samaritan, the Samaritan who returns to thank Jesus because he was healed from leprosy. Who else does he reach out to? The physically poor. This is the widow's mite. And even the spiritually poor. Remember the shepherds showing up at the crib? In the days of Jesus, shepherds were not nice people. They were kept outside the city walls because they would steal. They would kidnap children. So Mary having the baby in a cave along the road, it's like giving birth in a bus stop along the road, the highway. And who are the first people who show up? The Hell's Angels. That's what the shepherds were. And remember, the last person in the gospel to hear the good news, the good thief. And he wasn't a very good thief, was he? He got caught. He wasn't a good person, he was a thief. Jesus reached out to those who most needed him. I talked about evangelization at the beginning of Mass. Who in our life most needs to hear the good news? Who in our life most needs to experience Jesus' love and healing and compassion?